Good morning, people of the internet. You're listening to Debi Radio, 79.5 FM, a podcast where we discuss the movie Grosse Pointe Blank 1 minute at a time. I am your co-host, Dev.
And I'm your other co-host, Hugh. And on today's show, we are looking at minute 97. And this time we kick off with cars squealing, doors slamming, cars squealing, and plot revelations ahoy.
And joining us once again on today's show, we have David Brooke back for a second week of Pain and Punishment with us. David of Blueprint Review and DCB Productions. Welcome back, David.
Nice to be back. As I didn't mention it just in the last episode, but in the previous week I did profess my love for this film. It is an old favourite of mine, so I'm happy to come back and talk about it 2 weeks. And very helpful.
It's so good to have you back as well.
Thank you.
And for as we were saying before we started recording today, some more exciting minutes than you were subjected to the first time around.
Yeah, definitely.
So yeah, glad we could get you back for these.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to open with the kind of a follow up to a point we had yesterday about this car chase and the
are we calling it a car chase now? Because we were kind of discussing it whether
they
it
are
even
chasing
qualifies.
each other, I guess. But
I guess, yeah.
I feel like there's a chase. There's a chase.
Yeah,
element.
kind of. I guess. Yeah,
they're driving a bit quickly.
Yeah. Well, this is the thing, right? They're not. I mean, watching
for a
this
suburban neighborhood,
right. And for us, we're watching this, over and over and over again for these minutes. Often without any sound on, so we lose all of the screeching tire effects and stuff, and all of a sudden it's just a sedan car driving around a corner at maybe slightly higher than is advisable speed, but probably still lower than I frequently do in my neighborhood.
Plus they're just in the car pretty much all the time. There's no like we were talking about earlier about the cool kind of 70s and 80s kind of shots by the wheel and all this kind of stuff, really low angle stuff on the seeing the road flashing past. You don't get any of that sort of stuff. You get a couple of wide of the cars driving and squealing. Very few.
And nobody's taking a pop shot at each other either.
No, that's surprising.
Again,
at this point, why on earth does Bart actually think somebody's after him? Because presumably he didn't really see the van ahead of him. All he saw was Martin tearing up to him and forcing him into the car and then driving off again with a bundle of paper.
And what I don't always get is why doesn't Grocer take a quick pot shot at Martin at that point? Because he pulls his car around to the front, doesn't he? He could easily. Yeah. I mean, it's tinted windows. Maybe it's hard to get an accurate shot, but you'd at least have a bit of a go just in case.
I think that might be where this film errs on the side of saving money, because clearly they can't afford a full car chase machine,
and they don't want to break the glass.
Yeah, exactly right. It's like we can't do that for the cost. But I think the other thing is that I think you could put it in terms of professionalism and the job, right? Because now that Martin's involved, Grocer has the chance to kill two birds with one stone. But I suspect that given Debi's involvement with Martin, he'd rather just wipe them all out, right? We know he's used to dropping extra hats on the floor. We know that he's used to, collateral and overkill. And I wonder if he's just going to go back with them because he's pretty confident they're heading to the house and. I
mean, it does make the cleanup more contained and easier, I guess, if everyone's in location. Exactly. And he has overwhelming force,
streets.
So, yeah.
That's
plus,
it.
Plus, is there still an element that he still has a little bit of like glimmer of hope that he might join his co-op and like I don't know, he still has a slight fondness. There's a bit of a love-hate between the guys. I don't know, maybe he just needs a moment before he just take a pot shot at him.
Yeah, that's fair.
Maybe. Yeah. Because he does. So. I'm trying to think now. I must admit, it's been a month or two now since I've watched the whole film through. But am I right in thinking he does still try to kind of win him over at the end, or is that more just a ploy to pull him out and shoot him? But I don't want to. I guess this is moving further on in the film, but
there definitely is a last ditch effort to win him over. How sincere it is, or how much it's just to try and get Martin in the open is a good question, but. Yeah, that does get called out. Yeah. So Bart's ability to speed read.
Yeah, we get to have the even shorter version from Martin talking quickly, but Bart suddenly rips over and got all those pages. And like, I don't know about you guys, but even as the passenger in the car, I can't do that.
And plus, he's like, my whole life is like, how do you read your whole life that quickly? No,
Yeah. But
I guess you could see headers and like, I don't know, just general.
Yeah, maybe.
I don't know. It is
funny though.
Yeah,
it is kind of funny, and I also like I love the cut between Martin saying one thing and Grocer saying exactly the same thing about him. That's one of those joyous moments of comedy and satire that make this film so good.
Yeah, it's definitely and one of those moments that you're like, okay, this is written, this isn't real life, but it's entertaining and enjoyable nonetheless, especially in the kind of high pace, frantic tempo that we've entered in this kind of third act of the film with rapid cuts, not a lot of time for exposition or desire to do it. And I wonder if it was shot that way, or if this is part of, this is a symptom of the cutting room, whether he was really just trying to cut things down to get down to that 90-minute mark that the film was clearly shooting for, even though it didn't hit the mark.
I mean, I'm not sure.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I guess it's just I don't know. I'll just play into the audience. Like, people want the excitement. They want it to build up for the finale. They want a satisfying payoff, and punching up the pace is one way of doing it, I guess. I don't know.
Yep.
There's also a sense that we are out of the seriousness of what happened in the hotel room.
Yeah.
The tone has radically shifted
in
the space of the last minute.
Although, I mean, the film, as always throughout, is heightened and is comedic and stuff. But yeah, I know what you mean. It does have that moment where it does kind of get a bit more serious.
And I think the scoring has a lot to do with that. I think bringing in that punchy line from the Pogues really helps you change your mindset, change your tempo, and not worry so much about the conversation that Martin has really like only just had with Debbie. It was like 2 minutes ago in the film, right? And already we're in a completely different mindset, really, just because of that scoring, which strikes up almost as soon as she's left the hotel room.
Very much so. And this is the thing, isn't it? It's a reminder. You could argue that for a film that is constantly going back and forth between these two genres, it has been more balanced before, and that length of time we've taken in the last couple of weeks of episodes to get from the high school dance and the throwdown with Poubelle to just to this week's episodes. That as a length of time, that's probably the longest bit of seriousness we've had, I think, for some point, maybe for an hour or so. And so, yeah, it is kind of, there is almost a certain, not quite, I mean, there's almost a certain relief. Oh, yeah. We were talking yesterday about the comfort of 80s car chase sounds, but there's almost a relief here. It's like we're back to wisecracking and funny cuts between people, and, it just feels a little bit more like the film we started with, if you see what I mean.
Yeah. And we needed that tension to break to keep moving forwards, because there wasn't an easy way to move forwards otherwise.
Yeah,
and I guess it's balancing it anyway, because there is, although he says we're bringing back humor here, but there is a darkness here. We've got a definite threat to the lives of characters we care about. So it's I guess it's just constantly trying to juggle this tone that he does so well throughout the whole film, and it's just doing it at a more rapid pace here, I guess. But it's true. I think it gels nicely. Personally, it
does come together, doesn't it? So the actual nature of what Bob's done is still unclear. Like, it's still one of those things where you're like, well, it's a plot MacGuffin, right? It's not, without being an object. It's a plot MacGuffin in the sense of something we would normally need to know plot wise, but actually we don't need to know it. It doesn't matter. All that matters is what he said earlier in the pre-dance conversation with Martin, and what Martin's saying now. All that matters is whatever it is, it's bad enough for him to get a hit. And we return to that theme of Martin saying that if I show up on your door, it's because you did something pretty bad. Whatever Newbury has done, it's so bad he's got this hit out on him. And that allows us to kind of work it out a little bit as well in our heads. Like, we don't need to be told. We just know that it's bad enough that Martin would, Martin has his standards, and this is bad by his standards. And then in addition to that is what Newbury himself said a while back about what he did for a living.
I never understood this line. The SI division wants me dead over a leaky sunroof. Never made much sense to me.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm missing something there or if it's just nonsensical filler language that's...
Okay.
As they're getting out of the car, yeah.
Yeah, I forgot about that. Do you know what? There could be two things going on there. Because, maybe that's, the job he's had recently is working in ordinary car design. And he's like, wait, what? But then he's read the file, so maybe, I don't know. That's weird.
Well, as I say, he did skim it, so he doesn't know exactly.
Yeah, maybe that's the joke as well. It's like, what do corporations hire people to take out other people for? Especially in the 90s. I mean, I don't know. It's a weird thing. I used to have a book done by a journalist who worked at Time Out and The Guardian literally called 50 Mysterious Deaths in the British defence industry. That was literally the title of the book. And it's 50 chapters, and each and every one of them is a case he investigated, for which there is supposedly an answer that the police were happy with and no one else was. And all of them worked in the MOD at one point or another, usually in the days leading up to their death. It's one of the scariest books I've ever read. Scary, because you're just like, okay, so this whole idea of the 70s spy film of rolling up an operation where you basically start executing everyone involved so you've got it cleaned up has some sort of sense of validity, I think, in that sense. I feel like there are things that have happened over the years, and that's the motivation, even if it's not that important.
Yeah. The other, speaking of kind of scary, is we don't get a lot of development of Dan Aykroyd's counterparts here, but the driver is wearing a ball cap that very much looks like the logo is influenced by the Stasi logo of pre-fall
good
German
point.
Secret Service, which I thought was a nice little touch. I mean, it's not quite the same thing, but it definitely carries that vibe. It's kind of a shield shape, red and black with a kind of lightning bolt dividing them, and then a kind of black hawk over the red.
Yeah.
Very, very, I mean, not very similar to the main icon of the Stasi, but it definitely same color palette. It gives a similar vibe. Obviously, everybody knows that lightning bolts used in military insignia is a good idea because that doesn't have any callbacks to worrisome units at all.
Fair point. And then, of course, there's the drug taking.
You're right.
Durazak. Have a hit of this before we go charging in.
I mean, if this was a new film that had come out and that was, Durazak featured quite as heavily, we'd assume it was product placement. I mean, this is what, the second, third time it's been fairly prominently mentioned by a main character.
Yeah. No, absolutely right. Absolutely right. You kind of would go there, wouldn't you?
Yeah, it's another one of those slightly prescient things that this film kind of features, surprisingly.
And then we were coming back to what you're saying about the dialogue and why why Newbury's the target as they charge into the house, and this is just in the last moments of the minute. And Debbie comes running down the stairs and says, "What's going on? And what's he doing here?" And he says, "My testimony, Martin saved my life." So when his answer to what's going on is "my testimony." Now, way back when we talked about him earlier, Dev, I seem to remember you saying something about this whole business of him being involved in some sort of, legal situation where he's decided to cleanse his soul,
Yeah, turn state's evidence or whatever. Yeah, I mean, I feel like this is all that I had to go off of for that, and it's kind of struck a chord, and I guess it's very effective script writing, right? Like it tells us pretty much everything we really need to know in just a couple of lines. It's maybe a little unsatisfying that we don't really understand what's going on here, but we don't need to, right? I mean, the actual, the corporate entities or whoever, the overlords that are paying for all of this are kind of beside the point at this stage, right? They're just what's the term? Thingamajigs, narrative thingamajigs to get us there.
MacGuffins, almost.
MacGuffins, that was the word I was thinking of, yes. They are just MacGuffins for this. Yeah.
I want to mention this shot just as they come in the house. So it's quite an odd shot. It kind of pushes in, moves up and tilts down. It's quite an odd little movement as Minnie Driver comes in.
Yeah.
Just a nice little random little touch.
It is very odd. It's one of those many. So Dev definitely brought this up. I don't think it was in the 5 minutes we had with you, Dave, earlier. It was with someone else. But there is this thing throughout the film of these moments that are a little bit more elaborate. Cranes are involved. They've planned it more carefully. This starts low down.
Yeah.
Very much a kind of Lynchian look, and then suddenly rises up to match them, and then we edit cut out again. And I keep wondering if there's a version of this film which was more stylized.
Yeah, because a lot of it is quite straightforward. A lot of it, because it's a dialogue-heavy film, but it kind of keeps quite a fairly standard, just cutting between close-ups kind of thing. But every now and then, I think actually there was a shot like that in the previous week I came. Just not quite as unusual as that, but there's kind of a crane shot, a bit of a classic crane shot. In the minute that I had, that just kind of came out of nowhere. And then otherwise, as much as I love the film, it's visually not always that exciting, but it does have these little moments where the camera, the DOP's kind of throws something.
I really feel like the only reason that camera angle is done the way it is so that we can see Debbie running down the stairs and then in the foreground, and then move into like a close up of the group talking.
Yeah. It could have been done different ways. You could have had the shot just on her coming down the stairs. Could have done it cutting easily enough. So it's just a nicer way of doing it, really. But
it's also good. It also allows for the light, because when they close the front door, there's very little light downstairs. So at least when she's upstairs, you've got the light from the window, and then there's light downstairs. So in terms of having some lighting done for you naturally before you add in.
It does. I guess a wider shot like this does help a great deal for what is going to come as well, because we're about to have the big shootout in the house, and it's nice to get an idea of your location, about where people are going to go, where people are going to hide, and it is important for a scene like this to kind of establish that architecture, the kind of the mapping of the space. So I guess it could be doing that as well, really, with this wider shot.
That's always a thing, isn't it, in action films? It's the whole notion of geography. The geography of making sure that the audience understands where everything is in order for you to then get on with the action.
It's like that whole whole argument people have about, because a lot of people complain about the kind of fast cutting, kind of intense close up, shaky cam stuff, and a big reason that doesn't always work when it's done badly. Obviously, it can work occasionally. So, what Greenhouse does. It's a good example of that. Not greenhouse, green
grass.
Green grass, greenhouse. It's always close. But whereas in other films it's just a mess because you don't understand what's going on. You don't understand where you are. You don't understand where the characters are within the space. You don't know who's shooting at who. You're just seeing people flying around.
I think this was such a big debate in the 90s, right? And I think there's a really good example of where I think it is right to criticize and where I don't think it works quite as well. A lot of people criticized the first Tomb Raider, Simon West's direction, for having no sense of geography in its action scenes. And I've watched that film a lot of times, and obviously it's got nothing to do with the script and everything to do with Angelina Jolie. But the fact is that the action scenes are actually well put together, and there are establishing shots, and there are moments. They're brief. The editing works against it. And in particular, the final fight in the temple doesn't work in the English cut because the BBFC had cut it for headbutts. And so you have to, when you see the uncut version, everything makes so much more sense and flows better because there's not these jarring moments where they've had to pull out something that was actually not just an action movement, but then connected to the next edit and how the fight is sequenced. On the other hand, you get something as in complete contrast. You've got something that is beautifully put together, and yet people still complained, and that's something like people who are Hong Kong influenced, like with Matrix. We mentioned it off mic, Matrix Reloaded. I remember some reviewers at the time were like, "Oh yeah, this bit's good, but that bit's very confusing. That bit doesn't work." And I was like, "Guys, can we just stop? This is as clear as day. You're just not paying attention." And I think that's the thing as well. Is like, it's also about what you're used to. Like, I have never had a trouble with Michael Bay stuff, but that's because I don't see his films in the cinema. I see them at home. And if you watch the editing, if you watch a whole bunch of Hollywood movies, you watch the behind the scenes, a lot of them, they don't edit them anymore, like with the machine set up in a cinema, like in a small cinema, right? In the projection section. They edit them on large TVs. So all of a sudden, stuff that gives you a headache in the cinema probably will give you a headache in the cinema because they didn't make it like that. They cut it together using a gigantic TV. And so when you're at home, it works fine. Like the Transformers films, the editing's crazy, but it works perfectly fine at home. Like, yeah, there's stuff I can't always follow, but the majority of it I can. Greengrass, on the other hand, is an artist. Like there is, like, he calms it down after the second Bourne film. Like the third and fourth are much calmer, but there is some insanely good editing in the final quarter of the Bourne Supremacy, when once he starts moving through the marketplace, smashes the bottles, wraps the bloody hand. From then on, there's just these incredibly subtle back and forth nod, switch back, show you him, then show you his point of view, and everything is incredibly fine tuned so that when the car chase kicks off, I mean, I still think to this day that's one of the most incredibly edited car chases. It's so well edited. There's shots that barely last a second, but you know what's going on, where everyone is. You know where that car came from to hit him. It's such an incredibly dense amount of information. But again, people didn't like it. Hence they had to calm it down. I think you have to be not just a talent of editing and directing to put it together. I think you also, as an audience member, have to have the patience to pay attention and be, it's not the thing you can watch.
Your phone in your hand.
No, exactly. I mean, I think the last action film of any scope I saw in the cinema was probably Star Trek Beyond. No, I saw the last Mission Impossible in the cinema. But even then, people sitting there looking at their phones, talking to each other. Like, yeah, no wonder you didn't think the action sequence was any good. Where the hell were you?
Yeah.
Sorry, rant over.
Shall we wrap it for that minute?
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah.
Okay, so this was minute 97 of the Grosse Pointe Blank podcast, Debi Radio 79.5 FM, featuring your co-hosts, co-writers, and co-producers, Dev Soligar and Hugh David.
Today's guest is the returning David Brooke of Blueprint Review and DCB Productions. David, where can we find you and the stuff you're doing?
Yeah, if you head over to blueprintreview.co.uk, that's where I do my writing on film and related media. Check it out.
You can find us on all good podcast players, also on YouTube, X, and Spotify at Debi Radio, and our website, debiradio.com. And for all of those, it is DEBI Radio.
And if you do want to come and talk with us about this film or anything related to it, then please find us at the Facebook listeners group, Debi Radio 79.5 FM Fan Club. That is, one last time, DEBI Radio.
Sure was clear that all of this was new. Concentrating hard like a little girl, smoking for the first time. It wasn't a moment.